From damaged minds that became endowed with special abilities, to electrical accidents that cause supernatural side effects, here are 10 people who gained superpowers after an accident. Number 10. Orlando Serrell. Here's a rather surprising story about a young boy who had some real sense knocked into him. Literally. This happened back in 1979 when Orlando Serrell was playing baseball. Everything was going fine until a ball smacked him right in the side of his head. Of course, he had not been wearing a helmet, so the ball did some serious damage to the left side of his noggin. And even though he got up moments later and continued to play ball, something had already happened inside of his mind. After complaining about headaches for quite some time, they eventually cleared. And when they did clear, Orlando realized he had shocking new abilities. Orlando was able to perform the most complex calendar calculations ever. He was able to remember the weather from every single day that had passed since the day of his incident. At the time, Orlando quickly became a media sensation. Since then, he's even allowed medical professionals to study him in an attempt to determine how a baseball to the head gave him such unprecedented powers. But we gotta warn you, this is not an experiment you want to recreate in your spare time. You're bound to wind up with nothing more than a headache. Number 9. Franco Magnani. Let us introduce you to a fascinating individual. Mr. Franco Magnani was an Italian immigrant living in San Francisco back in the 1960s. Up until the 60s, he'd been a perfectly normal person with nothing wrong and no particular skills when it came to photorealism or memory. He was just an average guy. But then, a strange disease struck Franco and he became terribly ill. Serious symptoms like a fever and delirium, the kind of sickness that people often used to perish from, or at least go mad because of. And in his delirious dream states, Franco dreamed of his home from childhood, back in Pontito, Italy, which he had not seen for at least a decade. When Franco finally woke from his terrifying delirium, he would paint the dreams he had seen, and as it turned out, the pictures were perfect snapshots of the village in which he'd grown up. It seems that somehow the fever had unlocked photorealistic imagery from somewhere deep in his brain, and he could now recall exact pictures of things he had seen from childhood. Basically, the fever gave this man the incredible gift to paint perfectly real photographs. And now for number 8. But first, let us know what superpower you wish you could get in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you're new here. Number 8. Jim Carollo. Here we have a man whose entire life changed at the age of 14 when he was the victim of a terrifying car accident. In the car accident, Jim's mother was killed, and he himself fell into a deep coma. The car accident resulted in extensive brain injuries, and he was injured to such a shocking degree that the doctors never thought he would live for more than a few weeks. However, against all the odds stacked against him, Jim did survive. He went through rigorous physical rehabilitation and returned to school, and that was when he realized that he had a gift. Before the car accident, he had literal zero interest in math, but then afterwards, math just kind of flowed out of his brain. He managed to ace all of his geometry tests in high school, then skipped straight to calculus, passing each exam easily. Jim was able to remember every single number in every solution like it was nothing. It took him only a single day to memorize 200 digits of pi. Talk about an accident jangling loose some math skills. After his brutal car accident, Jim became a certified math wizard. There is not a math question on earth that Jim can't answer in a split second. Number 7. Tony CICORIA. Tony CICORIA was 42 years old, a former college player and well-respected orthopedic surgeon in upstate New York back in 1994. In that same year, he was at a family gathering on a lazy afternoon. It was pleasant, there were a few clouds in the distance, and it looked like it might rain. Tommy went to make a phone call at a nearby payphone. He phoned his mother. His mother hung up. He was in the process of hanging up the phone himself, and a flash of lightning rocketed out of the phone and hit him straight in the face. According to Tommy himself, the next thing he knew, he was flying backwards. This amazing story was in a very real report by The New Yorker. Tony claims that after he was struck by lightning, he could see his own body on the ground. He thought he was dead. He said he had the perception of going extremely fast and being drawn upward right before he was slammed back into his body. But the craziest part of the story is what happened after, when Tony had an insatiable desire to not only listen to piano music, but to play for himself. Tony had preferred rock and roll before, but ever since he was struck by lightning, he had an undeniable compulsion to play and listen to piano music. He even went so far as to hear music in his head. Tony went from knowing nothing about the piano to being a relatively skilled piano player, all because of a shock of lightning through a telephone. Number 6. Derek Amato. This story is relatively new. In fact, it's pretty similar to the story of Tony, but with a bit of a twist. In 2006, Derek Amato had been living in Denver, Colorado. One day, for whatever reason, Derek decided to dive into a pool. Well, the pool was a bit too shallow and he clanked his head on the bottom. He blacked out and woke up in the hospital. Because of his hard hit on the bottom of the pool, Derek was left with massive hearing loss, brutal headaches, and persisting memory problems. The accident also left Derek a musical prodigy. He'd never been musically inclined until after the accident. He then began to see in his mind a continuous stream of music notes. Without even trying, he had the ability to sit at a piano and play complex pieces of music that most professionals took years to master. Nobody understands how this could be possible, but there's no denying that it's true. Number 5. Tommy McHugh. This is one of the most shocking turn of events that we've ever come across. Tommy McHugh never cared for art in his life. He had no interest in paintings, he had no interest in poetry, and he had no interest in any kind of artistic expression at all. In fact, Tommy, who comes from the United Kingdom, was something of a troubled youth. He lived much of his life in the ordinary fashion that most people do. But then an accident on the toilet would totally flip his life around and reinvent his purpose on Earth. Tommy'd been sitting on the toilet when he claims that he felt an explosion on the left side of his head. Tommy then ended up on the floor, and according to Tommy himself, was kept awake only by the fact that he did not want to be found with his pants down. However, Tommy claims the other side of his head exploded violently, or so it seemed, and the next thing he knew, he was waking up in the hospital. From then on, Tommy discovered an almost obsessive interest in art and poetry. He soon discovered that it was all he wanted to do: paint and write. The real kicker was that he could do it almost perfectly. He turned out to be an amazing painter and a fantastic poet, and it was all because his brain nearly short-circuited when he was sitting on the toilet. Number 4. Liam Hoekstra. Meet the boy who will make you ashamed of your current body shape. Liam Hoekstra, at only 11 years old, had the body of an Olympic athlete. This kid had legitimate super strength. He had bigger muscles than most grown boxers. However, this young boy's super strength came from a genetic condition that caused a suppression of the gene that was supposed to produce the kid's myostatin. In a normal person's body, this gene suppresses the growth of muscles. This is so that people's hearts don't grow too large and cause them to die. However, this boy didn't have that gene, so he was endowed with 40% more muscle mass than the average person. Number 3. John Sarkin. Here we have yet another story of a man who suffered a terrible brain injury, only to be gifted incredible powers. According to a report by The Guardian, John Sarkin had been practicing as a chiropractor, 35 years old and perfectly healthy, when he suffered an enormous stroke. It came on suddenly and devastated John's mind. But after he recovered, John found that he had manifested an intense need to create. Perhaps this was because his brain needed to make sense of what was going on around him, we can't say. But the fact remains that after he recovered from his brain trauma, he became an intensely talented painter and went on to create phenomenal works of art. Number 2. Javier Botet. Meet one of Hollywood's only real-life super-powered humans. His name is Javier Botet, and he hails from just north of Madrid in Spain. You may recognize this Spaniard from such movies as Mama and Slender Man, and even had a cameo in Game of Thrones. Javier Botet is one of the most popular creature actors in the business, but it's not just because of his love of cinema or an inherent skill in acting. No, Javier is extremely popular in the horror subgenre because he's 6 feet 6 inches tall, and he was born with something called Marfan syndrome, which makes people very tall, very skinny, and extremely flexible. While not an accident exactly, we highly doubt anyone chooses to be born with such a genetic condition. It is lucky that Javier found something that he can do with his condition that he loves. According to a report by the BBC, he's able to do extremely strange things with his limbs and fingers, since everything on his body is longer than average and can move in extremely unusual ways. He's probably the closest thing that we have on Earth to a real elastic man. Number 1. Jason Padgett. There appears to be no shortage these days of people who had accidents and then turned into math geniuses. However, Jason Padgett is a little different than all the rest. The man, who's originally from Alaska but has been living in Washington state, was not born with a love for math. He, like all the other overnight math geniuses, had a horrible accident. While out with his friends one night, Jason was attacked, beaten horribly, and robbed by 2 men just outside of a karaoke bar, which happened in September of 2002. The attack gave Jason a traumatic brain injury, which ended up giving him obsessive-compulsive disorder. Jason became obsessed with pixelation and began drawing incredibly complicated mathematical designs, sketches of circles and triangles overlapping in incredibly complex ways. His injury had allowed him to understand and draw the most complicated geometric shapes known to man. Thanks to his bizarre talent, Jason took a liking to math. He was discovered by a physicist while walking in a mall, and Jason soon enrolled in college and was on his way to being an aspiring number theorist. Being kicked in the head truly unlocked something wonderful in his mind. Which of these superpowers are you most envious of? Let us know in the comments below, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time for another amazing video. Thanks for watching this episode. Did you like the video? Tell us what you think in the comments below, and be sure to like, follow, and subscribe.